Hi, Massive D here. So ship launch fighters have been around for quite some time now, and from various testings, we now have a good idea which variant and which loadout is currently the most and the least effective. In this video, I will demonstrate my personal favorite, and explain why I think it's the best one. Our mothership of choice for the purpose of the video will be my A-rated PvP corvette, as I also want to explore SLF capabilities against player ships in combat. So let's shoot at this corvette with a few different loadouts and see what kind of results we get. I brought two loadouts for the purpose of this test, an Imperial fighter with fixed beam lasers and heat sinks, and a F63 Condor with plasma repeaters and a missile defense. I will not be wasting any time showing Taipan footage, as I think that at their current state, they are just a complete joke and not viable neither in PvE nor PvP. I will explain why as this video progresses, but for now, let's take the F63 Condor for a spin. For the first part of the test, we will see just how much damage these little things can dish out given the absolute best scenario. And please keep in mind that I'm not saying that this is what you absolutely should be using or not using at all times. Ship launch fighters are great stress relief toys, and if you are just taking them into extraction sites simply for fun, then there is no single build that I can recommend you. Any of them will do just fine for that purpose. However, if you are into min-maxing and care about nothing more than raw performance, you should find the next bit of this video interesting. So rules for the test. On both fighters, we will set 4 pips to weapons and 2 pips to engines, as this is what you'll have the fighter set to during most of the combat time. We will keep firing until the weapon's capacitor runs out or the fighter overheats.
I'm not the target, Commander. Stop that.
Warning. Temperature critical. Warning. Taking heat damage.
So using plasma repeaters, we have managed to barely do 10% damage to the corvette's outer shield layer. And one thing I don't like about the repeaters is that their projectiles have a significantly long travel time. At a target that's a kilometer away and moving quickly, the lead time is sort of absurd. Now I do realize that plasma looks incredibly cool, and that it's a favorite to many of the players, but personally, judging on the sheer performance tests, I think that plasma is competing with gimbaled pulse lasers for the worst SLF weapon reward. If there were plasma loadouts that included heat sinks, then it would be a completely different story. However, there aren't any, so it isn't. Now, the thing with heat sinks on ship launch fighters is that not many people realize what their real purpose actually is. Spoiler alert, I think heat sinks is a very interesting way of spelling damage buffs. Maybe it's a typo? With that in mind, enter our second contender, packing fixed beam lasers with heat sinks. Exactly the same rules apply. 4 pips to weapons, 2 pips to engines, and we fire until we run out of the capacitor or we overheat.
Friendly fire, Commander.
Heat sink deployed. Heat sink deployed. Heat sink deployed.
Did you see that? Using heat sinks saves the energy used for cooling the weapon down, which is enough to keep it firing indefinitely until we run out of heat sinks. Now to be fair, the NPCs always set pips to 2, 2 and 2. However, this is a high-end PvP corvette. There's more megajoules in one of her shield rings than on a combat-rated Taipan. And on top of that, the shield is engineered for thermal resistance, alongside with resistant shield boosters. In total, she has something like 60% resistance against lasers and incendiary round multi-cannons. Yet, this little Beelzebub shaved off the outer ring of her shields like it was nothing. In 27 years, never have I been speechless. For our second part of the test, we are going to address the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to ship-launched fighters. We take the same corvette and same SLFs to a hazardous resource extraction site, and we are going to fight some NPCs. Let's start with the F63 Condor again and see how it does against this clipper. Okay, so a few things we learned from this. First one, you saw just how much lead you have to give when firing plasma repeaters, and if the enemy moves even a little bit, the target circle just goes wild. Second thing, I tried to get as close as possible and behind this clipper, as I should be able to do with a ship-launched fighter. But the F63 Condor simply lacked the speed, and more importantly, the maneuverability while turning, to pull it off. Now, Clipper is neither slow nor sluggish, but let's see how the Imperial fighter does against the same ship. I had to clear off the NPCs who joined the fight and accidentally damaged the Clipper. However, for our testing purposes, he's still healthy enough.
I'm not the target, Commander. Stop that.
As you can see, I had no problem staying in this Clipper's blind spot and preventing it from turning on me. While with the F63 Condor, I couldn't even catch it. On top of that, did you see how quickly fixed beams melted that Clipper's shield and ripped apart the remaining 25% of the hull? I know that I didn't give as much video time for the Imperial fighter versus the Clipper, those meddling NPCs messed up my setup there a bit, but watch this. Now this is a nimble fighter. Let's see how they do against the deadly Anaconda though.
Got the mothership, Commander.
Starting with the Condor again.
Affirmative, Commander. Holding position.
Under attack. Shields offline. Taking damage. Flight assist off. Flight assist on. Shields offline. Shields offline. Pilot damage.
And now the Imperial fighter.
Shields offline. Taking damage. Shields online.
And And I believe if I was in the Taipan, this NPC would have been able to get behind me. Because in Soviet Russia, Anaconda circles you. So here's my verdict on all three fighters. First, the Taipan. Now, for the F63 Condor, it may not seem like it from the video, but I actually like this fighter. I think it's the best looking one out of the three, and it's almost borderline good in PvE. However, it does get the multi-cannon loadout, which is very interesting, and I actually believe that at the current state these fighters are in, multi-cannon Condor is the only one that is actually viable in PvP if the controls are given to NPC. But wait a minute, what about the damage and the heatsinks and the fixed lasers? Let me explain. The biggest problem with launch fighters in PvP is that your crew NPCs are a bit dim, and SLF effectiveness in PvP is questionable. They will never figure out that they can, for example, use heatsinks to increase their DPS, so that entire state of affairs goes right out the window. You could do it yourself, sure, but if you let NPC fly your mothership in PvP, that's a paddling. Now, if in the future Frontier development lets us modify the weapons of our SLFs, adding disabling effects or debuffs like corrosive shells, or even let us set up sequences for our NPCs so they could, for example, execute the fixed beam laser and heatsink combo, then that would be a different story, and we would definitely see more scenarios in where these little ships are viable. But for now, and especially if you are using our Sea Torpedo build and you can spare a slot for a fighter bay, F63 Condor with multi-cannon loadout is borderline viable in PvP, and their damage against hulls is pretty impressive. But most importantly, even Dumbo NPC crews can operate them, because they can fire pretty much indefinitely. But the biggest saving grace for the PvP Condor is that the players won't focus it down, just like NPCs do when you're controlling it. And most of the time they will just concentrate on your mothership. So relatively poor maneuverability of the Condor will not be an issue at all. So last but not least, the star of our show, the Imperial fighter. It's fast, it's maneuverable, it's just about as much fun that you can have with your pants on, really. Combined with fixed laser beams, it is absolutely lethal against PvE ships. And if you don't have a good aim, gimbal beams are not that bad either. I personally could never sacrifice half of the damage amount for gimbals though. One thing to note, once multi-crew update comes out, Imperial fighters will be absolutely terrifying in PvP right out of the box. Can you imagine if your shipmate assumes control of this little monster, attacks the enemy with triple heatsink boost, suicide rams, jumps into another Imperial fighter, triple heatsinks, rams suicides again, and just repeats the process over and over and over.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says,